Okay, if you can hear us, go ahead and type in on the side in the chat where you're watching us from. If you're watching a recording, welcome to Noble Warrior. My name is CK Lin. Noble Warriors, where I interview entrepreneurs about their multi-dimensional journeys so you can consciously engineer your own life with more impact and meaning. If you have any friends who could use more inspiration to take that leap of faith, go ahead and share this episode with them. They'll really thank you for it. My next guest is Akira Chan. He's the co-founder of Rare Media, a next-gen video studio that produces transformational films, series, interactive content for entrepreneurs, organizations, and brands. His clients include Chopra Global, Mindvalley, the Genius Network and Abundance360 communities. He's also a co-host for Little Humans, a series on conscious parenting published by Mindvalley. Please welcome Akira Chan.
Thank you, CK. It's really an honor to be here with you.
So I know that we're a limited amount of time. We're going to dive deep into your current mission, Rare Media. But first, roll back a bit. Tell us the story about your grandpa that started it all.
Oh, okay. Yes, let's go there. So we can rewind the clock a little bit to when I was 11 years old. And you'll understand, your audience will understand why I like to share this story when I get to the end of it. So I had an assignment when I was 11 years old, and I was always a very shy, very creative, but very shy kid. And the assignment was to interview a family member. Could be anyone, could be an uncle, your parents, grandparent. And I chose my grandfather. So I'm mixed race. I have a Chinese grandfather, a white grandmother, a Japanese set of grandparents on the other side of the family. We're all mixed up. But I chose my Chinese grandfather because he was always this larger than life figure to me. You know, he was very, very powerful, very quiet and humble, but powerful when he spoke. And he used to be a boxer and a kung fu expert and a writer and all this stuff. So I thought he was like the most interesting person in my world as a child. So I said, I'm going to do my assignment on him. And where most kids ended up talking to their grandparents or whoever the family member was and writing it down, it was a written assignment. I went to his house, and my dad brought the family video camera because he thought it'd be a good idea to record our interaction. So what was going to be just a written homework assignment turned into a video interview. You could say, kind of say, my first video interview that I did as a filmmaker. With my dad as the camera operator. So
the DP.
Yeah, he was my DP. Thanks, yes. Dad. So here I am, like super shy, little me. I used to be called Aki. That's my family nickname. So I was little Aki. I was really shy. I had all my questions, and I'm sitting there with my grandfather on his favorite chair. And the first question that I asked him was, "Okay, Grandpa, when you were my age, around 11 years old, what do you remember?" And my big, stern, powerful grandpa thinks about it, softens, and then begins to cry. And I'm sitting there going, oh my God, what did I do wrong? And I'm scared. I'm saying, are you okay? What did I say? And he goes on to tell the story about how his family put him on a boat from Canton, China to the US without him knowing about it until he was on the boat, leaving the shore, watching his family drift away. Had no idea he wasn't going to see them for another 10, 15 years. And they were essentially saving him because they couldn't afford to even feed their family. They were in such a poor fishing village. So they were sending him off to the US to have a better life, which is a common immigrant story. But the point is, I, in that moment, saw something really unexpected. You know, we all saw this patriarch of the family have an emotional moment and share a very vulnerable story and cry and reveal himself. And even my dad, who was in the room, I didn't remember it at the time, but later he told me that he was crying too, because that was the first time he heard his dad tell that story in that way. Now, I didn't realize until probably about 20 years later, when I was almost 30 and well on my way as a career filmmaker, documentarian, that was what planted the seed for me, that you can tell incredible stories. If you have a camera in the room, it can capture pure emotion. It can capture magic. It can capture stories that otherwise wouldn't be shared. And the reason I love to share this story is because I like to encourage people to tune into that thing that wasn't necessarily what you decided to do in terms of a career, or you were interested in science, so you moved into this path, or you were interested in art, so you became an artist. But there's usually something, usually in your childhood, that planted a seed, and it usually had some kind of emotional impact on you, where consciously or subconsciously, your path, your fate, your destiny, and a lot of your consciousness was starting to move in that direction. And for me, that was it. It was as simple as that moment. I didn't realize it until much later on, but it was that moment that really shaped me and led me to pursue an entire career of putting a camera in the room, sitting down with people, talking to them, and sharing a moment of transformation.
Mm. Thank you for sharing that. Now, for those of you who aren't Asian, uh, Asian grandpas typically don't cry. They don't show emotions. It's very much part of the culture. Is very, very stoic, yeah,
Yes.
if anything. So the fact that you, with your first question, your grandpa show that vulnerable emotional side, it goes to show the potential, the prowess you got as
Yes.
a storyteller.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I realize now that it's those moments that I really work and seek, work for and seek in my own creative work. We do a lot of productions with my company, Rare Media, and the companies I work with. But there's always some element that I'm seeking, which I just have to call, transformation. There's a transformational storyline where the person I'm filming, or the story of this company or this event, there's some transformational element. And I really like that, because I feel like that's what unifies us.
Mm,
We're unified by our commonalities, but what gets us to certain places is the personal journey, the personal changes and evolutions that we experience in life. So
mm.
I'm always trying to find that transformational storyline to follow and film and share.
So I'm gonna go right into the mechanics of it, if you don't mind. Let's
Absolutely.
say, let's say you're an entrepreneur, you're an organization, you're a brand. It's so layered, right? There's so many things, the hundreds, perhaps thousands of things you can pick from. As a filmmaker, as a seasoned filmmaker who's been doing this, and this is also your dharmic path, right? Really helping people to tell their transformational story. How do you identify a singular, either a moment or a thing or a story to say, this is it. This is the heart of this transformational story?
Hmm. One of the ways I get there is by going to the root, going to the origin story, if you will. There's different words and concepts for it. It could be called like a blueprint. Um, I believe there's a Vedic term for it. I don't want to screw it up, but I think praktiki, or something like that. It's entelechy is another word for it, but it's the concept that in every seed you have the blueprint of what that seed is going to grow into, whether it's a tree, a flower, whatever it is, that's already built in there. And that sounds a little bit esoteric, even as I'm explaining it, but in some ways, that's what I'm looking for. So I'm looking to distill down from whatever it is. Let's say it's an entrepreneur. Let's say it's someone who has built an incredible business around health and wellness, and they're using technology, or they're using ancient wisdom, whatever it is. That's great. It's easy to tell that story. What I want to aim at is, okay, so where does that impact everything that you've created, the whole story around that? Where does that exist in the founder, and where does that exist in their upbringing, or their psyche, or
Mm,
their value system? And I feel like people appreciate that, because it's one thing to just tell a story in a straight linear way and in bullet points, but it's another thing to really unravel and show, the true drive that's moving this thing forward. And that's why I somehow, usually end up working with very values-driven companies that aren't afraid to take a stand about something or have a body of work focused specifically on something that's very personal to them and thus very passionate, that they're passionate about. Does
Do
that
you
answer the question?
It does, but I'm going to let's go a little deeper if you don't
Yes,
mind.
let's
So
keep
if I
going deeper.
understand what you're saying is, hey, understand what the company is up to. Let's say they sell creams or they sell, transformational widget that helps with their health and well-being. And then, so after you understand this storyline, then you're trying to find a parallel within the founder. Why do they want to tell or advocate for this creation of this widget? Is that a rough understanding of what you
Yeah,
just said?
that's a great explanation of it. And it's quite a common thing to tell the origin story, right? The
Mm,
founder story, the brand origin story. But it's really special to make it very personal and to focus on the personal, that spark, that personal moment that sparked everything that came from it. And I've been fortunate to talk to some, pretty amazing people who are entrepreneurs, authors. We work quite often with, as you mentioned, Chopra Center and Deepak Chopra. We also work with technologists and people who are 3D printing houses and have a mission to put solar panels on the roof of every house in the country. And then there's things that have a social impact. I worked on a film about addiction with a well-known marketer entrepreneur named Joe Polish, who is
mm-hmm,
known for his Genius Network
mm-hmm,
community. And he's a great friend, and we work great together. And we produced a film on addiction. And
mm-hmm,
when he first brought up this concept of wanting to make a film with me about the topic of addiction, I almost I almost refused because I had no relationship to addiction.
mm,
And I think I also had some judgments around it. Like, oh,
mm-hmm,
addiction is this dark, very important, but dark social issue that I don't fully understand. And it's this whole world of AA meetings and recovery and hard drugs and all kinds of stuff. And I had all these concepts. But when he sat down and told me his personal story and how he struggled with addiction from as a result of trying to cope, and it was his best solution, and he had massive trauma, and then he began to share with me all the other types of addiction, like process addictions, like workaholism, gambling, being addicted to social media, keeping yourself up for hours at night scrolling because you're satisfying that addiction, and you're coping and you're avoiding something else. When he explained it to me that way, and it was very personal, I had that same moment that I had with my grandfather, which was, oh, wow, this is actually a universal story. Like, this is a very emotional, personal, transformational story that almost everyone can relate to. And I said
mm,
yes. And we made a film about the link between addiction and art and creativity and why we've lost so many artists to
mm.
drugs and addiction and a downward spiral. And it was something I could get behind because I found that personal moment that Joe had in his life that then blossomed into this much bigger universal story.
Okay, so real quick, so Joe did an amazing job. He didn't just talk about the micro. Hey, here's my story about addiction. Because for
Mhm.
you, that was too narrow. You couldn't relate. It's not something that a world that you were even interested in. But he was able to very skillfully expand on the definition of addiction to social media, Netflix, success or workaholism or whatever
Mhm.
the thing is, for you to say,
Yes.
oh, wow, now if you reframe it, it actually applies to a lot of people. Is that what he did right?
That's right. That's right. And that became the framework for how I was going to make that film and tell that story. So something I'm always thinking about as a media maker is, how do you tell all sides of the story, but in a way that everyone can hear it? And anyone who's done a lot of personal development work, there's this idea of speaking into the listening. Like, if you're not speaking into the listening, they're just not going to hear it. People will get defensive, feel like you're accusing them of something, feel like you're labeling them. So those are things that I'm always trying to look at when I'm telling a story, is how do I make it universal and personal without simplifying it too much, but in a way where anyone can relate to that human experience. The visual I always have is when I'm making this video, when I'm developing a script, when I'm making something, is how do I get the person who's going to watch this with their arms crossed? How do we get them to uncross their arms? And that's something a film mentor of mine shared once, and that always sticks in my head, is how do I get that person who is just not wanting to believe it, not wanting to hear it, to uncross their arms and lean in and go, oh, there's something here for me. And that's relevant for marketing. That's relevant for, sharing a big thing to the world. It works in everything, relationships, parenting, all of it.
So, well, I think this would be a good segue to share your father's wisdom about the head, the heart. You want to tell that story real quick?
Oh yeah, okay. You're such a great interviewer. You do your research and remember all the topics. So yeah, that's been my latest journey, has been parenthood, fatherhood. And what's funny, and I think this is something I would suggest for anyone listening, which is my professional path, what you could call a career, has really been guided by all of my personal interests. And that might sound like a luxury. I know I'm lucky that that's the case, but it did take a leap of faith and a lot of risks to do that, to one day say, hey, I'm not just a guy with a camera and a computer who can do video. Like at some point I realized that's all I was doing, was saying, hey, hire me, I have a camera. Hey, hire me, I can film. And it wasn't leading me anywhere. I wasn't satisfied. There were a lot of things I was doing that I just wasn't thrilled with. And I realized that at a certain point, I had to say, hey, this is me. This is the way I see the world. What you're getting is that. I might be holding a camera, I might be making a film, but what you're getting is me and the way I see it. And it took many people telling me that before I actually understood it and embraced it. So I'm sharing that because my personal life and interests have always run parallel to what I'm producing and doing professionally. If it's a film about meditation, it's because I got into meditation the year before. Or if it's about culture and traveling and festivals and all that, it's because I was living that lifestyle. I was getting into the festival scene and all those things. And lately, it's been a lot about education and parenting. And we did a whole series on parenting the moment my wife and I, my amazing wife, Renee, who's also my business partner, we became parents 3.5 years ago. And because we live that way, we decided, let's make a series about parenting, and we'll learn all the secrets and the strategies and everything to become better parents ourselves by producing this whole series on parenting. And that led me to interviewing over 20 parenting experts, authors, other parents, and producing this series with the platform Mindvalley, which is an incredible personal development platform and company. And in doing that, I heard a lot of input, but what you had brought up was my own philosophy that came out of that, was that I'm always trying to interact with my son from a place that combines the head, the heart, and the hand. So the head is what you try to do for these kids, which is teach them to deliver knowledge, teach them about the world, explain things to them, answer all their millions of questions. Sometimes I clock 100 questions a day from our 3-year-old. and then the other aspect of that is the heart. So am I doing that in a way that also defines how to interact with the world? I've been very aware of how I'm modeling and interacting with the world from a place of emotional intelligence and what I just call the heart. Again, Asian upbringing, we can relate to this. There's a cultural thing. I didn't see a lot of emotional expression from my parents and family. So that was something I was always yearning for. I was yearning for like more hugs and more tears and laughing and more expression. So that's something that I'm working on with my son, is like, is my heart there? Am I approaching strangers on the street with warmth and kindness? Or am I closing down? Am I sharing my emotions with him? Has he seen me cry? Which he has seen me cry a few times. It took my grandpa, 60 years before any family member saw him cry. With my son, he's seen me cry already. He's only 3. So he knows that men and fathers can cry. So there's the head, the heart, And then the hand is more like practical tools, tactical, tangible. My son seems like a little engineer. There was one time when he was probably about 6 months old. And, at 6 months, like you're not even supposed to give a 6-month-old a spoon, because they could stick it in their mouth and hurt themselves or swallow anything, right? At 6 months old, he got a hold of my video camera, which is, is worth quite a lot of money, and lenses and everything. And he started to press buttons and take it apart. And next thing I know, he has the lens off. And I was going to yank it away from him and stop him and say, like, don't ever touch my camera equipment. You're too young, blah, blah, blah. And I stopped myself and I thought, okay, what is that element of like hands-on? Like, he's not going to understand a camera or the value of it if I explain it to him. But he's got his hands on it. I could show him how to put it back together. And that's what I did. I let him get his hands and fingers all over my camera and lenses and everything. And I showed him how to put it back and which buttons to press. And of course, by 1 year old, he was already putting the camera on the tripod and knew how to hit record, and he knows how to use a video camera. And nowadays I just let him touch anything, because he knows how to use his hands. And that's a technical example, but I'm also getting him into gardening, right? So hands-on, like repairing things, gardening, cooking food. For me, if I do one of those things a day, from head, hand, and heart, one from each category, I feel like I've had a successful parenting day.
And what about our soul? You missed that part.
Oh man. So the soul, thank you. The soul is kind of what I touched on with that, just being the energy, like the energy of that always being there, like always just being connected to the intention of things. And one of the things that, brings the soul into it is, am I being fully present? It's hard to be a full-time working entrepreneur on multiple projects and stuff, and to be fully present and have that soul to soul connection with a child or even a loved one, even my partner. So that is the almost unnameable, like untangible thing that has to bring all those other things together.
Beautiful. So I want to put a pin on conscious parenting just for a moment, so we can go more into that. But we'll unwind a little bit. We're talking about how do you tell a compelling story with individual organizations and brands. And part of what you said is, hey, tell a human story. And then, if I'm hearing you right, I didn't quite hear it explicitly, but I'm hearing you right. That's also the way of being that you bring in into interacting with your clients, looking at through your head, your heart, your hands, and your soul. Is that an accurate reflection?
Yeah, that is really accurate. I mean, I would say that something that I've just realized, in this particular stage of what I do professionally is, I'm not just a technician. Kind of like what I shared before, how whether you were a computer scientist, or even a founder, a technologist, someone who's an expert in nutrition, there's a certain technical element to what you do, right? You've memorized a bunch of different food groups and supplements and things like that. You're kind of really good at your craft technically. I try to maintain this balance where the technical is there. I can do things technically. I'm always improving myself. I'm always upgrading my knowledge around the technical side and the execution. But at the core of it is really me. It's my engagement and passion for the topic. It's my belief in the company that we've brought on as a client and we're now making videos for. It's my belief in the film idea that was brought to me that I want to fully see through and commit to for, up to a year, sometimes longer with films. They're huge commitments. They're big relationships. So for me, that's an element of creating that magic. So that's very, very important to me. You can put different labels on it. You can categorize it, whether it's a marketing videos or a film series, or even like just something explaining a concept. Like a philosophical content video. there has to be a connection. There has to be a connection that is both like curious and exciting, that can create something new.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you can create great work, but the process itself is not going to be very exciting, and
Yeah,
it's
I
not going
mean,
to stand out.
yeah, what you're referring to me anyway, the way I think about it is how do you not just doing the transaction, like here's money, here's the work, like very
Yes.
mechanical, very engineering, very externally driven. What we're talking about here is really, you're putting your life energy, your precious time, that's what's unique, spiritually of Akira behind these people's ideas. You're augmenting
Yes.
and you're fueling their movement, right? So in my mind, this is important for you to want to be fully engaged, the mind, the heart, the hands, right, and your
Hmm.
spirit as well. So
Yes.
that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's absolutely correct. And that's why lately I no longer see the work we do and the people we work with as just clients or just a job. For the last about 6 or 7 years, I've been looking at all of them as partners, long-term partnerships, sometimes lifelong partnerships and relationships. So I value their time and their vision as much as have come to value my own. It's quite equal, actually.
Mm,
So that's why we often work with people and really go deep and build long-term relationships and create some amazing work, is because we both meet each other at that place of really deep mutual respect
mm,
and commitment to what we're doing. And it took me about 20 years to shift my mindset around that, to change that paradigm from seeing things as just a job or a budget, and even, like picking and choosing projects based on that, to
mm,
picking and choosing things because they really want me to be the one working with them, and I in turn really want to work with them.
mm.
And that crosses many different industries and types of people, but that's always the underlying thing.
So I want to ask you a question about relationship, rapport building, and basically partnership. I think that's an important component. Remind me to come back to this just a moment. But I also want to ask a technical question, right? So what we're talking about so far has been ways of being, of engaging with your partners, using your words. At the same time, it's very noisy today, and it will continue to be even more noisy as we, move forward with technologies and geopolitical and different things that people are doing. Everyone is a content creator these days, right? So it will be even more noisy. So I'm curious to know, how do you identify the storyline that would break through the noise?
Hmm. Wow, that's a profound tactical question that we bring up, that is brought up in a lot of early development calls when it comes to film projects and marketing ideas. I feel like I have this conversation almost on a weekly basis,
Hmm.
and sometimes it shows up as, "Hey, we need to make a viral video, or we need to make something that hasn't been done before." And that's when I, kind of take a breath and I say, "Well, let's look at what you do uniquely, that you do better than anyone else, or that you are committed to doing, and
Hmm.
let's tell that story." So for me, it used to be a matter of watching a lot of what was out there and then kind of dissecting it and
Hmm.
figuring it out, because you could do that. Like you could get by just fine doing that as a video and creative approach. But I found that just became really distracting. Like you're
Mm,
constantly chasing and trying to figure out what worked about something that's
mm,
already out there, that's already come and gone. And
mhm,
like you so perfectly put, it is so noisy, and also, and maybe just more importantly, is it's so fast. The
mhm,
velocity at that something will capture everyone's attention for an entire day or a week, and then disappear, and you can't even figure out where it went. It's gone. It hits 5 million views and then it's gone. So we're living in a very different time, where even if you were to have the viral video and the thing that hits that velocity, you have to follow up with it over and over and over again, because that's not good enough. It just doesn't stand out anymore. So it's important to look at the creators who are consistently putting videos out that are getting tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions of views, and see what they're doing specifically. And usually what you'll find is they're doing something that is so personal and specific to them, and they're not doing anything else. And they may change the format, they may make different types of videos, but they are committed. And it almost becomes this volume, having the body of work that you spend years committing to, and having the consistency and the frequency. That is almost more important than trying to strategize what the one thing is that will get people's attention for that one moment that is becoming a smaller and smaller and smaller moment. So that's usually where I start is what would you like to do, or what can we do together that we can do consistently with excellence, that will be interesting, that we're excited about, and we can do over time and continue to do. Does that make sense?
It does. So what I'm hearing is there's an inside-out approach and an outside-in approach. Outside-in approach, as you talked about, it's more about like, let's do, look at everything everyone else is doing. Let's try to figure out what's, a blue ocean. They're not in there yet. Let's stay outside of the red ocean, and that's an outside-in data-driven approach, right? I think what you're pointing to is more of an inside-out. What is it that you, as the creator, as the author, as the organization, as the brand, want to do? And that's going to have you dedicate really your life, devote your life to consistently put out and stand behind, so they can have that compound effect, have that accretive effect, and that will ultimately come out ahead. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, you're exactly right. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I don't use templates or kind of a packaged list of things that we produce, where it's like, hey, you can make video A, B, or C. That's just not the way I work. It's always a fully customized, let's talk about what you're doing and the best way to do it. And I like to start from that blank slate. And I end up working with people who are very comfortable with that blank slate, which is why we work with a lot of entrepreneurs, because they're used to creating something out of nothing, right? They're used to solving problems. So we kind of love to mash, that place of like, ooh, what do we really want to tell, and how can we do it in our own unique way instead of boxing ourselves in? So you're right, that is more of an inside-out approach. And it's worked so far. So I continue to do that.
Beautiful. Well, by the way, Noble Warrior, the way we talk is very, what's the word I'm looking for? Not fraction, but what's the word?
Do you mean in terms of like the
It's
way that
very,
the information is organized?
yeah, everything is in parallel. It's gonna come back to me.
Okay.
It's gonna
Yeah,
come back
yeah,
to me.
it'll come.
Yeah, it will come. But let's zoom into your own story though. How did you come back and define, say, hey, we're going to do an impact-driven media studio production company, rather than things you have done before, like weddings or luxury or da 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 da.
Yes.
How did you pick your own lane, your own niche?
Yeah. I mean, for me, it really has been pretty
The word I
aligned
was
with
looking for is fractal.
fractal.
Fractalized.
Oh, yes.
Fractalized. Everything we talked about is very fractalized. So
I
there you
like
go.
that because that's the way I think.
Yeah,
So a
perfect.
fractal is like one idea that then another one branches off of, right?
That's
And
right.
keeps branching.
That's right.
Yeah. So you bring up a really good word, which is impact and impact driven. And sometimes I call our studio and my work lately as impact driven media. And the reason for that is, like the addiction film, like a film I worked on that was about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and other films that involve social issues like people experiencing homelessness, or people who are in need of natural treatments to diseases and things like that. There was always some kind of impact that the media piece was making. So it wasn't just simply branding. It wasn't simply just making a video for video's sake. There was a lot of actual real world impact for it. And I like that I see a lot of documentaries out there in the world and a lot of other media producers who are starting to shift in that same direction. It's like, let's create something that actually has an impact, and then let's build a community around that. So for me, it was a result of me just being surrounded by very interesting people who raised the bar for me in terms of the topics I cared about, in terms of some of the more important issues to be making films about. And I realized that my time and my skills are very valuable, and I could put them towards things that might inspire people or might support someone, might be interesting. But I can begin to take that to another level, which is let's link up my skills and my work with actual brands, foundations, organizations, where I could say, hey, I supported them in making this impact, in getting solar onto the roofs of 1 million people, or in helping to, get 100 people, 200 people out of addiction cycles. And this measurable impact became very important to me. So that's one of the other kind of filters that I put on my work these days, which is it making an impact? Is it having a tangible impact? Is it working with an impact entrepreneur or organization? And can I see that my work, my personal work, is having that effect?
How
That
did you
it's
come up with those
shaping the world.
criteria?
I mean,
Because I'm
it's
sure it's
been,
a process, right? And it's not just, I mean, it could be just like, you know, divine download, all of a sudden super clear.
yeah,
What did you do to come to that conclusion?
yeah. I think it was just, for me, it was a decision. It was a maturity decision, because I know a lot of other filmmakers and creatives, whether they're the ones I work with on my team or peers of mine, who don't really do that. They're very happy with just being a cinematographer and filming for something different every single weekend. I think, to me, it's very important. One of my values is building a body of work. It's important for me to have alignment with what I'm doing and where I'm putting my energy. So for me, that was a creative moment of maturity, kind of a creative awakening, if you will. At some point, it's not just about the joy and the passion around filmmaking or whatever your craft is. It becomes about, what are you doing with that, and how is that going to build a certain story or legacy or impact over time? And it has everything to do with my own personal maturity as a human, as a man. And that's I'm still early on that stage. I'm still learning a lot every day. And things I say no to these days, it's not because I don't approve of them. It's just because maybe that was me 15 years ago, making music videos. Maybe that was me, 10 years ago. I would say yes to doing this little job that was for this brand, gave me a paycheck. Now I have a discipline and kind of a maturity and also a focus ahead that has me easily just say no, sorry, no thanks. Here's someone else who can do that, who'd be great for it. But I'm actually focused on these particular topics at this point. And it's going to keep changing.
Yeah, talk about that metacognition framework if you don't mind. Because let's say, I'm an entrepreneur. Like, I'm just give you some concrete examples that clients are dealing with, right? I'm an entrepreneur. I have a business that's working well, but I have a call like this no longer compels me anymore because it's just doing the job. Now I have a call to do something that really ignites my soul, right? Or I have an inkling of an interest and like something's tugging me there. I don't know exactly what. Tell me about the metacognition framework, such that have you went from, let's say, weddings or music videos that just paid the bills to
Mhm.
impact driven. Like, how did you just shut it off overnight? I'm doing this, or was it like a transitional period where you actually make conscious decisions to balance your effort, your time out?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great thing to look at. And you're right. There is a metacognition. That's a really great concept. I have to look back. I have to look backwards to make sense of it now. And I feel like it was a slow transition over time. I can't say there was any particular moment where I woke up or was in a ceremony and it just like the switch flipped, as it often does for people. For me, it was this, transition over time of challenging myself creatively. So it went from this actually isn't challenging me anymore. I'm filming things the same way. I don't want to do another wedding. I don't want to film another event. And I wasn't feeling challenged. And I feel like whether you are in a creative career or if you're a surgeon, you know, if you're a doctor, if you're a competitive mountain biker, I feel like there always should be that element of you challenging yourself and doing things where you could fail and do fail. So for me, that was one element to what you're sharing. There was part of me that was saying, hey, there's this larger place I'm growing into, and to grow there, I'm going to have to get to the edges and be uncomfortable and say yes to some jobs that I don't feel like I'm capable of, and just say yes and then learn as I go. And I did that with films. I did that with projects that had big budgets or projects that I didn't know anything about. I would say yes, and then I would rise to the occasion and train to where I could execute that film or show up and be able to do my work. So there was a lot of that. And with that came this natural growth of doing more significant things and becoming clear about, you know, what was for me and what wasn't for me. But I have to tell you, CK, like, I'm still in this process. Every single week I'm dealing with asking myself these questions. You know, I just turned away a documentary project that had a $1 million budget, you know, healthy independent documentary project. But I had to say no because I'm not the person to do it. And it was so hard.
What makes you say that? Why do you say that?
Because it's a film, having done a handful of documentaries now and knowing what it takes and the commitment, which is at least a year, sometimes more. A film of that size, we do little things and big things. We do a lot of 5-minute things, series, and then we do feature-length documentaries, which I love. But I've learned that unless I'm really passionate about it, it takes a lot to get to the end. You gotta commit to it, and it takes a lot to just finish a film, let alone get it out there and distribute it and try to make money back on it. So when this approached me, you know, me 10 years ago would have said, oh my God, that is a good size budget. It's here, it's tangible. I could say yes to it. Absolutely. Where do I sign? And at this stage, the first question I ask is, okay, am I going to make that commitment to this film and this project and these people for a year, maybe 2 years, maybe more? Once I do that, how does that define me? Okay, I just put out this film. Okay, I'm going to, people come to you for what you put out, right? At a certain point, it's not about what you do, but who you are and your body of work that begins to define you professionally. So you're always judged on your last work, but you're also, you're sought after for your most recent work. And you become that person for that genre. And it happens at the small scale as well as like the big commercial scales. So for me, it was clear that it wasn't for me because I just wasn't personally connected to that particular documentary subject. And I knew, and I know that there's someone out there who is a follower of this person's work, this would be their dream project, and I'm not going to keep it from them. And I don't want to dupe the producers either and say I'm the person for that. I'm going to let them know there is someone perfect for this job and to direct this film, and it's not me. And it was a big relief for them. And it was a big relief for me, and everyone wins, and it'll happen.
Yeah, is that okay? Well, this is a great segue to our previous conversation about choosing partners, because you had said earlier, they're no longer your clients, they're your partners, and partners that you want to develop a long-term relationship with. So that's one criteria, right? Another criteria you just talked about is, hey, how will this film or project define me as a part of my body of work? And the third, obviously, is the sizable of funding and capital. It's so it allows you to drive to different places, right? So these are three obvious ones. Are there others that you haven't shared in terms of choosing who you want to be a partner with?
Yeah. I mean, there has to be that personal connection. I have to like the people I'm working with. And that's another thing that I myself have experienced in my career. And I see a lot of professionals I work with experience with their teams and their organizations and their staff. And it takes a lot to find the right people and to build these long-term partnerships. And sometimes there needs to be that tension. Sometimes tension can create amazing things. But at the end of the day, what is the sacrifice you're giving to your health and your well-being and your mental space? So I've always had pretty amazing experiences where the people I'm working with, whether that's the videographers I'm hiring and working with, or the people I'm filming with, we always have a great relationship. Like, we actually enjoy each other, we respect each other, we enjoy being with each other and producing the work. And it's not to say that we don't get into arguments and there's tension and there's a lot of challenge that goes into producing stuff and getting it out there. But like, one of my biggest things is laughter. Like, if I can laugh and joke around with my clients and partners and these people I'm working with, and we could just be ourselves around each other, that for me it's become a normal thing. And I realize it's pretty abnormal, but that's become a normal thing. And because of that, it's kind of become like an expectation of mine. Like, I gotta just like you as a human. I gotta really connect with you, like really feel like there's that kinship, and I could be in your shoes doing that. I love what you're doing. And then for, on their side of things, they usually love what I'm doing and love my role. And, that's the foundation of it. It's really about the who is much more important than the how, what, or why of the topic or what we're doing.
Yeah, it reminds me of a book Dan Sullivan just put out. Who, not
Who,
what.
not how. Yeah, who, not
Who,
what, or
not
who, not
how.
how.
Yeah,
Who, not
yeah, yeah.
how. Yes, I was going to mention Dan Sullivan because that I think of that all the time now, which is one of the reasons why I'm on this podcast, my friend, is because you're a who that I really respect.
Oh, thank you.
I definitely had no intention of being on podcasts at all, or more podcasts. But when CK Lin asked me to be on a podcast, I say yes.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that, and thank you.
Yeah.
I'm flattered. Thank you. Has there been any situations where you were involved in a partnership, and then any of those things above, you say, "All right, I'm out." Was there anything like that?
Yeah, of course, there have been. I mean, I don't have like the perfect slate, just like no one has that with past, boyfriends, girlfriends, partners, marriages, things like that. And I've only had a few of those, but it was because we outgrew the relationship.
Mm,
So one thing that I recommend to other creatives, creative professionals, whether you're a painter or a videographer, graphic designer, marketer, you end up partnering with, you should partner with people. That is one way to grow. I don't recommend people stay a lone wolf for too long. You can make a career out of it. But every growth phase of my career has been opening up and actually working in collaboration with people, to where I now am very comfortable working with a team, getting out of the way, saying, "Hey, I know I'm the director, but why don't you direct this scene? Because
mm.
I want to see how you'll film this. I want to see how you'll work with this person." And that's been a great gift, is like knowing when I could step away and also empowering people, but also pulling myself out of the equation. So I'm sharing that because I recommend that people try out partnerships and relationships as a way to grow. You can only build great things with a team, with more people, even just that one person. And partnerships can make or break you. My wife and I started a business together. We've always done business together, and it somehow works. It doesn't work with a lot of couples, but for some reason we
What do you
fit
think that
together.
is? What do you think that is? What was so magical about the two of you
Yeah.
that goes against sort of the grain of, don't do business with your romantic partner or family or things like that? Like, what
Yeah.
about it? It's so special.
I mean, number one is just her. Renee, my wife, is an amazing woman who knows who she is and is very, like, just a solid, capable person. So a lot of it is me just really leaning on her strengths and letting her teach me things. The other part of it is contrast. So I have had the partnerships, both professional and relationships, that didn't work out in working together. There wasn't enough contrast, or you could say yin and yang complementary energy. It was a lot of the same, and it began to butt heads. So when I tried to start a business with a ex-girlfriend of mine who is an artist, we both wanted to be the artist and the creator, and no one wanted to do the hard work of, making money from it, or accounting, or building a business. So we were always stepping on each other's shows and competing with each other. Same with professional relationships. I've partnered with many other filmmakers. The ones that didn't work out, we were outgrowing each other. Like one of us couldn't let go, or I was naive and was doing things my way and not understanding the process and getting ahead of things. So it's worked both ways, but in all those aspects where it didn't work out, I saw that we both just needed to grow in different directions. I think it's fully possible to grow together and have great partners, have great relationships, and build stuff. But at a certain point, it becomes clear that someone's going this way, and you or the other person is going in a different direction. And the sooner you can be honest with that and let them know, the better. Because there's been a few, both professional and relationship, intimate relationship, where I wasn't honest. I waited 6 months, a year, or 2 years before letting them know. And that's where things can really, really fall apart and take a toll on people.
How do you keep that? Because you're a husband, you're a father, you're a business co-founder, all mixed in one, right? How do you keep clear lanes? For example, like, hey, between this time, I am business partner, or at this particular location, I'm, father, husband. Anything
Yeah.
like that to make sure that, because just the capacity is different, right? From a loving partner versus a very rigorous business partner. You know what I mean? So how do you
Yeah.
clearly define or preempt the conversation that you got about to have with each other?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's an ongoing dialogue. It's always evolving. I haven't thought of the concept or the word multidimensional for a while until you brought it up in preparation for this interview. And I think that's what it is. It's like recognizing that there's a multidimensionality to the day and the roles I play and all the tasks I have at hand. And it's just impossible to try and compartmentalize it. It's like all one thing flowing into it itself. Like I'm here focused working on a project, and then my wife brings my son here, and that pulls me out of it, and I'm okay with that, and I play for a bit, and then I come back into it. And if anything, it's it's a matter of being able to just go with the flow but stay focused. So I have a rigidness and a focus every day, and I do have routines, but I am completely unafraid to completely break them and break routine.
Yeah. Well, since this is where the conversation is, why don't we go into that? And then let me contextualize a bit, because I hear you saying you have 5, 6 projects happening at the same time. And in my mind, I'm thinking, because I've done events before, I've done kind of like a mini, production before. So there's like hundreds of things happening at the same time within each project. So that is hundreds and hundreds of things you
Yes.
need to keep track of, right? How do you have all of that going and still maintain your presence as you're so demonstrating here right now? How do you do that? Like, how do you ritualize or protect your presence?
Yeah. I just remind myself to be present and to be open, to be flexible. And I don't always do a great job at it. There are many times of the day where I feel very overwhelmed by things, or show up, get back home an hour late, or miss something. There's a certain commitment to my work that sometimes will negatively affect my personal relationships. I would
Mhm.
disappear and be completely consumed by a project for months and don't see any friends, and only see my family. So for me, it's this ongoing process of just prioritizing things. I would say that one thing that might be useful for entrepreneurs to hear is that you should expect everything to be blended in, and for that just to always be the case. And you should embrace blending it all together. So family, marriage, relationships, your work day, your relationships at work with your, your professional team and peers and stuff like that. The more you can blend those actually and not try to separate them, can work for your mindset. But there is a very much a value in routines and certain sacred, let's just call them, sacred priorities, right? So now, and it took me a while to do this, now my weekends are pretty much just sacred time for family and friends. I don't usually touch the computer. I try not to check email. I try not to be on my phone while I'm at a park with my son. And it's my way of just unplugging. And I don't really set strict guidelines on myself, but it's just an awareness. It's an awareness that I can only give, 60% over here if I'm still leaving this door halfway open. So that's what I try to do lately. And some days it's freaking hard because I do have 6+ productions going with, 30 conversations happening all at once and 60 to 80 emails a day that I have to respond to by the end of the day. And I've learned to just focus on each one at a time, knowing that whatever gets done will get done, but try to just focus and not try to focus on everything, like not try to, kind of have everything be blurry, but in my field of view, versus having one or two things completely in focus in front of me and just take care of them.
I love that. So, concretize that a little bit. You do your best to be present. You carve out non-negotiable days, the weekends, as family and friends time. And you do your very best when you go into parks or specific locations to not touch your phone. These are two clear tactics that you implement. Are there others?
There are certain morning routines. I learned a lot working on a film about morning routines. There's a very popular book called The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod, who's an amazing human. And he created this morning routine of different exercises, exercise, meditation, reading, journaling. He systematized it. And this book and the system became so popular, it's been translated in 20 languages and it's all over the world. So we made a documentary film talking to various people about their morning routines, a lot of thought leaders, a lot of well-known people. So when I was working on that film, I was actually practicing Hal's Miracle Morning and doing all those things every morning. And there is a beauty in having a set of things that's very specific to you, that you just do. And what seems like you're forcing yourself to do it, or I don't have time to do all those things, it just becomes a natural thing that you can rely on. So for me, that's a little bit of meditation. It's morning exercise. It's the drink I make in the morning, which is like a lemon, honey, turmeric tea, which just I feel great throughout the day after I do that every morning. And it's just making sure I do certain things to set myself up and begin the day. And I stay consistent with it. Another thing I do, which is interesting, is I have a big journal and some pens, and I sit down and I try to draw something. I just sketch. I just draw anything. I don't think about it. I don't have any distractions. But I've been filling up this enormous journal every day with drawings. And there's something about that routine, which I'll call a meditation, which taps into a flow space for me. It kind of separates everything else I'm doing. It's my own personal, private ritual. So I think having personal rituals like that are very important, because if it's something you can do anywhere at any time of the day, it gives you that flexibility, right? You're able to do it at least once a day, any day. Wherever you are, even if you're traveling. I think those things are important. So if you have a few grounding rituals, routines, that's what that's what I like to rely on, and that's what I think could really help with that.
Thanks for that. Yeah, morning rituals are very important. And by the way, I recommend you check out Rome research
Oh,
as a
okay.
new software, as a new tool to help you capture your consciousness.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
Yeah.
I'll check
And
it
we can
out.
geek out more about that. I can show you kind of what I do. But
Yes.
I'm curious, you're a creative, you help other tell compelling stories about, it's very meta that way, right? You help other people to tell their story too. So it's
Yes.
pretty awesome. I love it. How do you think about this? How do you think about creativity? Do you
Oh,
have the
wow.
mental model of, this muse is visiting you and giving you ideas, or you're more of a materialist, like, hey, I'm just polishing something that's right in front of me?
Hmm.
How do you think about ways to get into that flow state and then guide this creative energy through you?
I'd say I'm personally more of the muse artist, which means I do really well with partners and with some kind of idea that I can then fully wrap myself around and apply myself to. So I think that's why things progress so quickly when I work with big thinkers and creative people or authors or experts, because I can they have the story that needs to be
Mm,
need to be told, and I can, you know, in a way, be the vessel for it and be the megaphone for it. And I could just wrap myself around that, or I can embrace it, or I could plug into it and then just tell the whole vision. So I work best in those types of relationships. Um, I feel like there's a few, that's a certain creative type. And whether or not that's learned and I've just kind of fallen into that role, it's where I like to play. And there's other creatives who they are more of the, I'm going to produce something that completely from scratch. I'm going to tap into that, tap into the ether and pull something in and release it and, carve that statue or produce that work of art. I like that too, but I'd say I don't think I haven't made a specific career out of that.
mm,
Eventually, hey, I might shift towards that type of production, but at the moment, I just really like working with people. I like
mm,
being brought a story or an idea at any stage and being able to see it and see it completed and then make that happen.
mm,
So I really enjoy that. And you bring up a really good concept because, I think anyone who's creative, whether they're creative in business or creative in art, they understand that, they may get hundreds of ideas a day or an hour, and what can you do? Can you actually achieve all of those? You usually have to pick one. You usually end up not picking any and letting them go or coming back to them years later. But, I do believe that those are out in the ether. And in some ways, everything that we consciously create as a humanity, as individuals, come from that web of ideas and creative ideas that we all have access to. So very much, like in Big Magic, the book, where what's the author's name for Big
Elizabeth
Magic?
Gilbert.
Elizabeth Gilbert talks about that muse, that idea kind of whispering in your ear. And if you don't begin to immediately put your hands towards it, it will go and whisper in the next person's ear. And I feel like that's happening all the time. And, there's also part of me that understands there are some artists and creatives out there who want to do what hasn't been done, or, the kind of needs to have their own fingerprint on this particular thing. And I would say, you know, you'll see. I think you might want to just embrace everything and listen to what you can do and execute on what you can do, and not be not be too picky, not turn away those divine moments of inspiration. CK, you have disappeared. I'm now alone on the podcast. I hope you come back. Let's see. It looks like we're still recording and you are back. Yes.
Okay, awesome.
It ended at a
Okay.
good point. I finished my line and then you disappeared. I was
Oh
like,
my gosh. This is the first time.
CK dropped
So
the mic.
yeah, it's perfect. No, it's perfect. So well, you do have a unique uh, uh um angle to look at some of the thought leaders that shapes the zeitgeist of our time, right? You've hundreds and hundreds of, Deepak Chopra is a great example. What do you think separates the transcender thought leaders to everyone else?
Hmm. I mean, there's people like, like Joe Polish, who I mentioned, who has built an entire community around just him being himself and sharing things quite personally. It's not so much about the topic; it's more about the human. There are people like Deepak, who's in the spiritual world and health and wellness and meditation. Peter Diamandis is another person who's completely on the tech and future side of things and can articulate convergence. All of these people, and of course there are many other female visionaries and luminaries as well. And for every single topic and every single visionary, I think what's important is it's the person who can speak to the concepts and in a way that everyone can understand, and in a way where they're creating this convergence of ideas and thoughts in a very creative way and sharing that, and being able to broadcast that. So sometimes I'm just the broadcast method for the visionary, the person who has already dedicated their life to that particular topic, and that's something that I really enjoy doing. It's very complementary.
Mm,
And I
got it.
feel like there are more and more of those people that show up every day. There's so many incredible ideas and startups and brands that pop up every single day and every single week. And I'm always more interested in hearing from the founder, hearing what the founder's story is, what personal story led them to launch that company, what challenges they're facing as a person. So for me, it's much more about the human at the center of it all. And then from there, the community that they build around it, and what is that community doing, and what do they look like? And then what is that, them and the community, what exactly is that? And that is often the brand or the program or the culture that they're building. Like they're building a culture that's going to have its imprint on the world and on history. So it's like I'm always looking at that as an incremental, like these circles that become one mutual whole.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, I'm very much aligned because part of what I do is to go through the process to help them awaken and polish the idea that's within them such that they feel they are giving themselves the permission to say, hey, I'm the person to bring this technology, this idea, this concept, this service to the world. Follow me, and then building communities, and then and work with you to with the megaphone, right, to share that. Because in my mind, we are what we make, or and also the other way around, we make what we are first and foremost. It's very much an inside out, right? So that's why I'm very intentional about having conversations like this, such that other people can say, hey, if Akira can do this, if CK can do this, if all of these podcast guests can do this, so can I. Let me step forward and step into prominence and into my own path.
Yeah, I think that's very important. And I think you could call it, values. When I think of like the title of your show, Noble Warrior, it just gives me the sense of someone who is committed to a certain path. And the way they want to do it is with excellence and honor, whatever that means. I think that's being fair, being kind. In my world, it's those things: compassionate, doing things that are generative, that are win-win for all people, that don't do any harm. And the warrior path is interesting because I feel like that's what's needed to move the world forward, and that may be something that has evolved in me. I used to be just much more open and in communities where everything is perfect and always in perfect harmony. And there's a certain amount of tension and taking on the warrior path and moving towards your vision and fighting for it that I think is necessary to really move things forward in a positive way. I'm always reminding some people that this concept of I want to see more do-gooders become good doers. So being a do-gooder used to just be enough for me. I'm pro, I'm pro environment, I'm pro people, I'm very spiritual, I meditate, I do all these things. But what was I doing? Like, where was the like head, heart, hands, spirit? The hands, the actual action, the learning how to build a business, learning how to make an impact, learning how to follow through with things, work with people, work on the non-creative side of things. That's me going from being a do-gooder to being a good doer, to actually being able to create things and move powerfully forward. So that's something I really have a high value with, and it's usually that warrior archetype that I'm attracted to. The person, one of the people I'm partnered with right now, his name's Jonathan. He started a solar company, but it wasn't that he thought it was a good business idea. He was in the Amazon and saw the impact of climate change and deforestation and things that were affecting that part of the planet. And he came back, and all he wanted to do was just do his part. Like, how can we get more solar on the roofs? How can we move towards clean energy? And that, he took on a warrior archetype to fight that battle. And it's like tapping into that story to me is always the most important thing. What is driving you or this mission forward that's beyond it being just a good idea, an interesting business, something that generates revenue. There's got to be something else that is really just like you are on a mission.
I love that. Can we go a little longer?
We can, cool? Yeah. Okay, I'm happy
awesome.
to go a bit longer.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. So in terms of your own journey, as well as watching other people's journey, what are some of the ways that you continuously elevate your own consciousness? How do you balance, right, your evolution of your consciousness, juggling being husband, entrepreneur, father, man?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I'm guessing a good chunk of your audience might appreciate this statement, but my days of like the 4 nights of ayahuasca journeys and medicine ceremonies and going to Bali and all this stuff are over. And right now that I'm a new parent, I'm running multiple businesses. I have various people who rely on me. I have a marriage to support and nurture, and I have a 3-year-old, one child. I know people who have 4 and who are doing what I do. But that element of taking time to elevate my consciousness, things that used to be very much embedded in me, being able to spend a lot of time on practices, being able to spend 2 hours a morning just meditating, just laying in the sun, practicing things, drawing, thinking about things, spending hours a day journaling. Those were so important for me and so critical for my conscious evolution. And now I have to find a way to do that in a way that works with everything else with very little time. So I would say that lately, my tools for expansion have a lot to do with my day-to-day interactions with people. It's the way I show up. It's the way I show up as a reliable partner, as a leader to my team. It's the way I'm guiding projects. And most importantly for me right now, it's the way I'm growing a human, someone who I'm that figure in their world where they're looking at me and every single thing that I do to shape their reality. So for me, it's opening myself up to their world, being in the magic of this growing child, being in the awe and the curiosity and all of those things. And that's become my practice. I'd say, a lot of people say about this, their spiritual path, their personal development plan, program, whatever it is, that takes the form of different things as you grow. Like your marriage becomes a big personal development tool in every way. Parenthood is its own personal development path. So for me, it's those things. I do miss just being able to tap back into more kind of ceremonial aspects of life. And I plan to bring more of that into my world because I think that is something that's really important. I have a friend.
Why do you think that's important?
I think it's important because everyone needs to individuate from their relationships, from work, from relationship, from parenthood, and be able to tap back into themselves completely. And, for me, that would be me like taking a hike, going on a full 1-day nature retreat, right? And just taking time completely to myself with no obligations to anyone else. Um, that's really important. I find that when I do that, I remember, oh, this is like my cup finally feels full. Like it's always, it's always 70%, 80%. Some days it's closer, but it doesn't ever get fully filled up until I do something like that. So I feel like that's very important, especially in relationship, and especially if you have, intimate interactions with multiple people all the time. It's like, where do you actually have that time to just sit with yourself and get to know yourself again? So for me, that's it. That's something that I certainly have not done enough of, and it's becoming clear to me that is very, very important if I'm going to continue to grow.
Awesome. Well, anytime you want to go on a hike, give me a call.
Yes,
Do some
I would love
reality
that.
bending hikes. Well, you're also big on lifestyle design. I know that you went from LA to Estonia, back in SD. So share with us a little bit about the lifestyle design aspect of things.
Yeah, I'd say that we do have a lot of freedoms, in that you can work remotely. There are many more options to be able to live your life and have either remote work be a part of it or have location freedom. Of course, many people don't have these freedoms, but speaking for myself, the career I've chosen, the type of people I work with, I haven't had to have an office, ever. We have a production studio now that I'm sitting in where we get to create in this amazing studio, but everyone I work with is remote. They're all over the globe. And I have to say, it's been pretty amazing to let that guide where I live. And even my wife and I, raising a kid for 3 years, we were just following production. If we had a project in Europe, we would go there for the summer and stay there for a few months. Then we would be in Chicago. Then we would be in Vancouver in British Columbia. And there's something really amazing about that. So again, that was a way of me just fully aligning and embracing what I do professionally with where I live, with the communities I surround myself with, and being very, very fluid and open to that. And
do you share more about sort of the pros and cons of, because what you share is a lifestyle that I would say 99% of the people don't have access to, right? So they have made
yes,
a very romantic idea of like, oh yeah, I'm in LA, this month, I'm in Estonia next month, and so on and so on. And so give us a little bit of a like pros and cons, and sort of why you choose a particular area or other. That would
yeah.
be super helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for asking that. I mean, it's very popular to be a digital nomad right now, right? Like for some people, like that's their career. I don't even know what they do. I just know that they're a digital nomad. And I can find them in, one of 5 places around the world, whether it's Tulum or Costa Rica or Bali. And that said, there is a excitement, there's a magic to doing that. There's a freedom to doing that, but I feel like in order to really build something, you do need to be grounded. And my wife and I and our family were not grounded during that time. We were uprooting ourselves. We were throwing everything into storage. And while the adventure, the trip was cool, it would always end up becoming very uncomfortable. You're coming back to having to find a place, having to pull your stuff out of storage, realizing, wow, we actually don't have a home. Technically, we do not have a home. We can call ourselves nomads, but the reality is we just completely dropped everything and are, basically just floating in space. And you can only do that so much before you realize that becomes a lifestyle in itself, and it's hard to build foundational things. So the stage I'm at right now, and the big con to that, and why I am happy for people who have a set foundational place to build from, is that makes a huge difference. You can really build things long term if you do stay in one place and invest your time, your energy into the relationships and the community around you. You know, I've been talking to a men's group I'm in. There's about 12 of us on this app, and we all leave videos, you know, for each other every day. And we've been talking a lot about culture. Like, we are constantly building a culture. Like, whether it's with our spouse, one-on-one, we're building a culture of a relationship. Or it's a circle of families, like the 5 families and kids that they all interact together, and we all, you know, co-parent together. That's defining a certain type of culture. And you can't really do that to a certain level if you are constantly leaving. You know, you can't build loyalty and lifelong, really deep, reliable relationships if you're always coming and going and changing your environment and moving with what's new. So that's been a big thing for us. And I have to say, we don't have the answer. Like, we're still very much like knowing we need to be here right now, but we don't know where that next destination is going to be. But I'm going to make sure that we fully land there and build a foundation there.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Cal Newport gave an interesting idea when I was reading his book, So Good You Can Ignore. Anyways.
Oh, I've read Deep Work. I haven't read that one.
Yeah, Deep Work. I think it may be Deep Work, actually. So he shared about 4 different ways that people use as a way to organize or self-regulate their creative bursts. One is monastic. You just go to basically a cave, right? And then you stay there as a monk, effectively, as a way to cultivate that deep work. Another one is bimodal. So you have a home, but when creative burst comes, then you go to that remote location to do your deep work. That's another thing. But then afterwards, you come back to your regular life, to be busy, to have regular lives, and so forth. The third is ritualistic. So you may do, you know, sometime in the morning, miracle mornings, and specific allocation of time to do your creative work. But throughout the day, you have different allotment to do different functions. The fourth is journalistic. You know, people are just creative on the move, right? As a fluid way, right? You have 5 minutes and let me write it, you know, my book idea down in that 5 minutes allotment. So I think what you're talking about, at least for me, what works is probably bimodal. So I like to have a base. I like to, you know, travel to different places. I don't have the similar circumstances that you have. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a amazing framework. I did not remember that, and I would agree. Yeah, I think bimodal is what I'm stepping into, whereas journalistic was probably what we were doing more in the past.
Yeah. I mean, I can't even imagine, like, it. I haven't done it, so I have no idea what that's like. But in my mind, I need my, you know, studio as a way to do my podcast and so forth. I can't even imagine to just traveling on the road, be a nomad, and do this type of deep conversations.
Yeah, I mean, you somehow find a way, you know, like have camera will travel was just kind of the way I was doing it for a while. And I've literally, I think we have pictures of it, but I have literally edited films and projects in Airbnb bathrooms, like with my computer, my laptop on the toilet and sitting in the bathroom, because that's the only space where I had power or had, you know, had Wi-Fi. So we've done it all. And as we mature, as our son becomes school age, and you got to look at schools and where you're going to raise them. You know, if we would have raised him in Europe last year and stayed there, he has a completely different childhood. You know, he's learning other languages. He's having to take on different cultures. So these are things you start to think about, especially for those nomads, those entrepreneurs who are parents. And I will say that we have some great examples in our world of parents who now have teenagers or adult children who did what we were doing, you know, who lived very creative, adventurous, kind of nomadic, entrepreneurial lives, and found a way to raise their kids and adapt their kids into it. So I asked them for guidance. You know, hey, is this a good idea or a bad idea to take our son here? So that kind of mentorship and guidance is really critical. You know, I'm not trying to just creatively create answers all the time. I'm asking for a lot of help a lot of the time.
So this actually is a Great question I want to ask you, because you said you have a men's group with 12 people that you're into, you share ideas with each other very intimate ways, and you're obviously interfacing with some of the thought leaders of our time, hundreds of them. Could you share with us how you cultivate relationships and consciously choose who to include, and what that is impacting your life and your way of thinking?
Yeah, I would say, during COVID, it seemed like people were either completely isolated or they found ways to try and adapt. And it's terrible. Like there's people who are just now like finally leaving their apartment and haven't done anything interactive or social. It was a rough year for a lot of people. I think because we were used to having a lot of different friends all over the place and having a remote business and being able to keep communication with clients going, like we kind of just kept things going. It wasn't too different working at home and being stuck in one location for us. So during that time socially, one thing that happened was a men's group I was in where we were just meeting, spending an hour together, either going on a hike, sharing vulnerably, to each person taking a turn or doing different exercises. We all joined an app and formed the group there virtually. So where some people were doing Zoom meetups, we were just on this app, and it's asynchronistic. It's called Marco Polo. You basically leave a video message and then you wait to see who else responds. And this is a very amazing group. It's all men. Half of us are fathers and husbands. Half of the men are melanated men or Black African-American men. It's a
I've never
culturally
heard that
diverse
phrase
group.
before. Melanated man.
Yeah. So we spent a lot of time talking about the events of last year, from
Okay.
the pandemic to Black Lives Matter to any topic that came up. We were in this group talking about it and just being very honest and having philosophical debates, having arguments, having awakenings. So that was one of the things that we came to identify as melanated, non-melanated.
I
It's a
like
great
it.
term. It actually is a great
I
term.
like it.
So,
I like it.
but the value for that for me is that to this day, we still leave about 5 to 30 messages a day on this app every
Wow.
single day. It's an
Wow.
ongoing conversation. And sometimes it's like one of the guys is going through a divorce. Another guy just had a baby. It's this ongoing dialogue. It's kind of like being around a campfire, a men's circle around a fire, and just having that be available 24 hours a day. And we plan to be doing this forever. And no one's left. A few new people have come in, but I'm sharing this because anyone can create this. You can create this with your closest girlfriends. You can create this with your parents. You can create this with any kind of group. And it's been really valuable to me because as much as it's important for us to connect in person and go on retreats and meet up and do that, the way that we are able to have a dialogue about things and get feedback instantly is invaluable. So what I want to share about this is, I think in order for us to evolve, and I'll speak for myself, the way I've been able to grow and evolve as a person and not come out of last year really confused or angry or uncertain or scared is because I had a group that I was able to talk through and share everything I wanted to share and get feedback and hear the perspectives of 11 other men from very different backgrounds. And I think that could be one of the most important things that individuals can do right now, is have that circle of people that you completely trust. And the only rule is you're just all open and honest with each other.
And tactical question, do they all know each other before they join the group? And what if let's say, they're in different cohorts, different circles, and then how
Yeah.
do you merge them into
Yeah.
this cohesive group?
What's cool is we didn't all know each other. We had a few in-person gatherings that were organized by a friend of mine named Preston Smiles, who's a really incredible guy based in Austin, Texas. And he was kind of the one who was bringing us together. But when we were in the room, there was no leader. We're all just sharing. So that group was organized around that circle of friends. And it's a very eclectic group. So I would say completely different cohorts. Some of us did not know each other at all. Others knew each other. We brought in a few new people, and we get to know each other so deeply through this particular method. You know, it's almost like we know each other. We know each other's childhoods. We know what's up in our relationships. It's pretty amazing. So, you know, I think that's the beauty of it, because you can join business masterminds. You can go to your local, you know, meetup at the gym, or your mountain biking crew, or you can have different groups and communities around different things. But this is a community just of men. We all happen to be men. That's the only mandate, or I guess, structure to it. But we all come from very different walks of life and very different opinions and philosophies and values and things like that.
It's so precious to have a inner circle, to have your men's group, for you to essentially be who you are, without the mask, without the facades, without any of the previous identities, and just have real conversations. So
yeah,
congratulations for having that. That's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a new thing for me, because I'm part of masterminds. I'm part of groups that come together, and everyone is either a entrepreneur or they're in a certain kind of niche, and we're all sharing ways to grow and build businesses. This is so different. This is just a group of humans, of men interacting. We're all different ages, different life experiences, and we get to support each other. And yes, we work on projects together, and we've started businesses together and things like that. But what's most important is the conversation.
What would you say to someone who is like, oh, this sounds awesome, but I don't know where to start? What would you say to those people?
Yeah, I would say go out on a limb and just ask a few of your close friends about meeting up, and see who shows up. Put it out to your community. I think now is a great time for reconnection. I feel like what's going to save us and really help people's mental health at this moment is encouraging community interaction. In some ways, we've been allowed to really be with ourselves and our beliefs and form some pretty structured beliefs, whether it's political or personal or cultural. And now we're kind of embedded in those little echo chambers. And I feel like there's a great opportunity now to encourage community. So, depending on who's listening, you might already have that circle of friends. So it's encouraging those circle of friends to get together more often, or jump on this app and share consistently. Like, hey, we're starting this for you to ask for help. That's the only thing that we're going to talk about in this group is, what do you need help with? Or you can just begin to organize weekend meetups and things like that. But I feel like social connection and rebuilding those interconnective points that are so critical for us to, being thriving humans is really important, especially, right here and right now, after, our collective experience of the last year and a half.
Beautiful. You might do some rapid fire questions?
Yeah, sure. I guess is that how you wrap up? That's great.
Yeah. So first question, and it could be rapid, it could be not. It's up to you. Okay. How do you capture, process, synthesize, and execute your inspiring ideas?
Lately, I do it in notes. I used to keep journals.
Paper notes?
No, digital notes. So the Notes app on Apple, I keep a note for every project, and then I have some that are just all my notes from things. That has replaced all of my little journals that would just add up, and I would never kind of go back to them. So it's a digital archive.
Beautiful. Love it. Forward looking, what's the environment you want to see for future generations?
Community, tightly bonded community in an environment that gives everyone what they need. So one thing I love about Europe is you have community gathering places. You have squares in every city, almost in every neighborhood. And a lot of people are talking about living in community, building communities. And I think that's great. I think that's really important. So that's what I want to see. I want to see places where people know and see and interact with their neighbors, their community on a day-to-day basis, but also have a shared space, whether it's a garden or a park or somewhere where they can gather and be together on a regular basis and build over generations. I think that is kind of the counterbalance to where we are now, with people living in isolation.
Mm. What role does rare media and storytelling play into that vision?
Well, I will say that almost every project we're working on right now has to do with the natural world. It has to do with growing your own food. It has to do with learning about nature. It has to do with sustainable living, sustainable energy. So that is the role that rare media is naturally playing. We're helping to tell the story. We're filming a farm that's being built outside of in Georgia. We're filming with some experts in growing plants and using plants as medicine. And we're also working with people who are focused on sustainability and rebuilding cities and giving people energy freedom, and so where they'll be able to build a community completely off the grid and things like that. So kind of just putting my camera and my creativity where my interests are and where I would like to see the future moving towards.
I love it. Last question. I'm going to use your question. What would they conclude from this interaction? How would you tell your wife about the conclusion from our interaction on Noble Warrior?
I would tell her, and I would tell anyone that I feel seen. I feel like I had an hour and a half of someone who just really wanted to listen to me. And the same way that I want to show up for people when I put a camera in front of them as fully themselves, fully open, I felt like I got to receive a little bit of that medicine, which I was not expecting, and it is actually really special. So, this has been really, really, really sweet and reflective for me in all ways.
Well, Akira, I just want to take a moment to really acknowledge you, how you showed up. I know that it took us a little while to book our time together.
Yes.
And who you are to me is someone who is on your own Noble Warrior path, and being that conscious father, man, entrepreneur, husband in the best way that you can, right? And really empower people to tell this incredible, compelling, extraordinary story that each one of us have through your eyes. They get to see themselves as an extraordinary being, living an extraordinary life. And from doing that, you work with impact-driven people, helping them tell compelling stories, and then bring audiences together into community, and whether it's virtual or physical. So I really just appreciate how you live in a very conscious way. I don't know how else to say it. So thank you so much for just sharing your wisdom here on Noble Warrior.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's been a true honor and just such a great conversation. So thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for your patience and us getting together and finally doing this. And I love it. I hope this gives some value to whoever's listening, and you're doing a great service to having this dialogue. This feels like a living dialogue and archive of wisdom. So I'm just grateful to play a part in it.
Absolutely. So for those of you interested in following Akira and Renee's journey, I'll share the links to Rare Media and also some of the work that they have done in igniting impact and Little Humans. So thank you, Akira, for being here. We'll
Absolutely.
do this again soon. Cheers.
Thank you.